Let me ask you something that I think is going to land differently than you expect. How many times have you said or felt, even if you never said it out loud, I just don't trust myself, or I don't have enough confidence to do this, or I wish I could believe in myself the way other people seem to believe in themselves? If that resonates, I want to share something from Bashar's teachings that completely reframed this for me. Something that sounds almost too simple when you first hear it, but that lands with a force that is genuinely difficult to shake once it truly sinks in. There is no such thing as a lack of confidence. It does not exist. Stay with me, because I know that can sound dismissive of something that feels very real. But here is what Bashar is actually pointing to, and it is far more precise and far more useful than the usual conversation about building self-confidence. When you say, I don't trust myself, you are not experiencing an absence of trust. You are experiencing trust operating at full capacity, pointed directly at your own inability. You are, in that moment, completely and powerfully convinced that you cannot do the thing. That is not a lack of trust. That is 100% trust invested in a negative outcome. Think about what this actually means. The person who says, I know I'm going to fail at this, is not someone who lacks conviction. They have extraordinary conviction, just aimed at the wrong thing. The person who says, I never follow through, believes that with absolute certainty. That certainty is trust. It is just trust directed at a story rather than at a possibility. Bashar puts it simply and directly. You do not need to learn how to trust. You already trust, automatically and completely, all the time. What you need to examine is what you are trusting in, because that is what you are going to experience. I remember the first time this landed for me with real clarity. I was still inside the financial and insurance world, and I was in a period of genuine self-doubt about whether I had what it took to build something of my own. I would tell myself I lacked confidence, that I needed to work on my belief in myself before I could make any real moves. And every day I spent in that story, I was reinforcing it. Not because confidence was genuinely absent, but because I was investing all of my trust into the narrative that it was. And the moment I understood what Bashar was pointing to, that the same energy I was using to be completely convinced of my limitation was available to me for something else entirely, something shifted. Not because I forced myself to feel confident, but because I stopped treating trust as a scarce resource I needed to accumulate and started seeing it as a directional choice I was making, whether I was aware of it or not. This is one of the most practically powerful reframes I have ever encountered around money and financial confidence, because most people trying to build financial confidence are approaching it as a construction project, as if they need to build something from scratch before they can move forward. But if trust is always at 100%, the work is not construction, it is redirection. The question is not, how do I become more confident? The question is, what am I currently choosing to be confident about, and is that actually what I prefer? That distinction sounds subtle. It is not. It is the difference between spending years trying to accumulate something you already have, and simply choosing to point what you already have in a direction that actually serves you. And here is the piece that connects this directly to financial life in a way I find particularly powerful. So much of what shows up as financial self-sabotage, the hesitation before a significant decision, the pulling back just as something is about to break through, the automatic contraction when a real opportunity appears, is not actually a lack of confidence. It is confidence, fully operational, invested in an old story about what is possible for someone like you. You are not lacking the power to move forward. You are using that exact power to stay exactly where you are. And recognizing that distinction, really, genuinely recognizing it, is the beginning of being able to choose differently. By the end of this conversation, I am going to share the specific moment I made that redirection in my own financial life and what shifted as a result. But first, I want to take this even deeper into one of Bashar's most liberating teachings. One that completely changes the way you relate to the concept of abundance itself and opens up possibilities that most people never even consider because they have been working with a definition of abundance that is far too narrow to let much of anything through. If you are new here, hit subscribe and grab the free PDF on equal hours and their meanings linked in the description. Let's keep going. So now we have established something genuinely powerful about the nature of trust and confidence. It is not a resource you build. It is a direction you choose. And the same energy you have been investing in stories about your limitation is available, right now, completely, for something entirely different. Now I want to take you into the teaching that I think has had the most practical, most immediate, most directly measurable impact on my financial life of anything I have encountered in years of studying consciousness and manifestation. And it comes from Bashar's redefinition of a word that most of us think we already understand: abundance. Most people, when they hear that word, picture one thing: money. A specific number in a bank account. A certain level of financial security that feels like the threshold between scarcity and freedom. And because that definition is so narrow, so singular, so all or nothing, either you have the money or you do not. Abundance starts to feel like a binary state. You are either in it or you are not. And when the money is not there, the conclusion is automatic. I am not in abundance. I am in lack. Bashar completely dismantles this, and what he offers in its place is so much more expansive, so much more practically useful, that once you genuinely absorb it, the way you navigate your financial life changes fundamentally. His definition is simple. Abundance is having what you need when you need it. That is it, and the implications of that definition are enormous. Because having what you need when you need it does not always arrive in the form of money. It can arrive as a gift, as a synchronicity, as a conversation that opens a door you did not know existed, as someone offering help you did not know was available, as a creative solution your imagination generates that bypasses the need for the resource you thought was the only path, as a partnership, a trade, an exchange of value that produces the exact outcome you needed without the financial transaction you assumed was required. Bashar teaches that when you rigidly define abundance as money and money only, you are essentially narrowing the channel through which the universe can deliver what you need to a single opening. And if that opening happens to be temporarily blocked, you experience the entire flow as stopped. When in reality, there are dozens of other channels available that you are not even looking at because they do not match your definition. I want to share something personal here because I think it illustrates this more vividly than any abstract explanation can. My cousin had been stuck for a long time. She had a clear vision of something she wanted to build, a direction she genuinely felt called toward, something that lit her up in a way that very few things had. But every time she looked at the practical reality of making it happen, she hit the same wall. She did not have the money, and in her mind, the money was the only way through. So she spent months waiting for the money, trying to generate the money, feeling increasingly frustrated and increasingly convinced that the life she wanted was simply not available to her without it. When she and I started talking about it more deeply, what became clear was that her entire focus had narrowed to a single channel. She needed X amount of money, she did not have it, therefore she could not move forward. Full stop. Every other possibility had become invisible to her because she had unconsciously decided that they were not real solutions. Only money was a real solution. We started exploring what she actually needed. Not what she thought she needed, what she actually needed. What would having the money make possible? What was the outcome she was really after? And as we unpacked that, something interesting began to emerge. The money was not actually what she needed. The money was what she thought was the only path to what she needed. But the actual need, the specific outcome she was working toward, could potentially be met through completely different channels that she had not allowed herself to seriously consider. She was a skilled communicator with a genuine track record in her field. She knew people who respected her work. She had something of real value to offer. And when she began to approach her situation not as, I need money to start this, but as, I have what I need when I need it, how might that look different from what I have been imagining? A conversation happened that she had been avoiding because it felt too vulnerable, too presumptuous, too much like asking for something she had not earned. She reached out to someone she had been meaning to connect with for months. She was honest about where she was and what she was building. She asked a question she had been afraid to ask, and the response was not what she expected. It was better. A partnership emerged that gave her access to exactly what she needed, not through money, but through a collaboration that neither of them had considered before that conversation. The money was not the path. It was just the path she had been able to see from where she was standing. The moment she expanded her definition of what abundance could look like, the channel opened from a completely unexpected direction. This is what Bashar means when he talks about abundance as a creative, expansive, multidimensional flow, not a fixed, singular resource that you either have or do not. And this is why your state of being matters so profoundly in determining what financial possibilities you can actually perceive and act on. Which brings me to the piece I promised you, the specific framework from Bashar's teachings that ties all of this together. Because the redefinition of trust and the redefinition of abundance are not separate ideas. They connect through something more fundamental, the concept of state of being as the lens through which your entire financial reality is filtered. And that is exactly where we are headed next. So now we have two pieces in place that I think are already changing the way you see your financial situation. Trust is not something you lack. It is something you are directing, whether consciously or not. And abundance is not a singular resource called money. It is a creative, multidimensional flow that takes whatever form is most aligned with what you actually need in any given moment. Now I want to bring in the framework that ties both of these together. The concept that explains why some people seem to naturally attract financial opportunity while others, working just as hard and with just as much genuine desire, keep circling the same terrain without breaking through. Bashar teaches something that sounds deceptively simple, but is one of the most profound ideas I have ever encountered about how reality actually works. You cannot perceive what you are not vibrating. You cannot see what is not compatible with your current state of being. This is not a metaphor. This is, in Bashar's framework, simply how the mechanics of consciousness and reality operate. Your state of being, the sum total of what you believe, what you expect, what you feel as your baseline relationship with the world, functions as a filter. And that filter determines not just how you feel about your circumstances, but what circumstances you are even capable of perceiving as available to you. Think about what this means practically in the context of your financial life. If your dominant state of being is one of scarcity, not necessarily consciously, not necessarily as a thought you are deliberately thinking, but as a felt sense of baseline reality, then the opportunities, the connections, the creative solutions that exist at a different frequency are literally invisible to you. Not because they are not there, but because your current state is not compatible with perceiving them. And conversely, when your state of being genuinely shifts, when you move from a baseline of scarcity and contraction to one of genuine openness and alignment, you begin to perceive options, opportunities, and pathways that were always there but that you simply could not see from where you were previously standing. I experienced this so clearly during my own transition out of the financial and insurance world. There was a period when I was making decisions from a state of genuine fear of financial instability, fear of making the wrong move, fear of stepping outside the structures that had defined my professional identity for years. And from that state, the options I could see were extremely limited. The path felt narrow. Every direction seemed to carry enormous risk. The creative possibilities that I can now see clearly as having been available to me during that period were simply not visible from where I was standing. As my state began to shift, as I began to operate from a more genuine place of alignment and trust in the intelligence moving through my life, something remarkable happened. Not that the external circumstances changed dramatically overnight, but what I could perceive changed. Connections I had not previously noticed became obvious. Opportunities that had been invisible suddenly appeared. The same landscape that had looked narrow and constrained began to reveal a richness and variety of possible paths that I had simply been unable to see before. This is exactly what Bashar means when he says that at a higher frequency you have more options. Not because more options have been created, they were always there, but because your state of being has expanded your perceptual field enough to include them. Now I want to bring in two more connected concepts from Bashar's teachings because I think they complete this picture in a way that is immediately practical rather than staying in the realm of beautiful abstraction. The first is synchronicity. Most people experience synchronicity, those moments of meaningful coincidence, of things clicking together in ways that feel almost orchestrated as pleasant surprises, as evidence that something is working. And they are right that synchronicity is evidence of something working. But Bashar goes further. He teaches that synchronicity is not the exception to how reality operates. It is the rule. Everything is synchronicity. Everything is orchestration. There are no accidents. The traffic jam that made you late, the unexpected delay that rerouted your plans, the chance conversation that opened a door you did not know existed, the opportunity that fell through right before a better one appeared, none of it is random. All of it is part of a larger orchestration that your rational mind cannot fully see from its current vantage point, but that your state of being is actively participating in generating. This reframe changes everything about how you navigate financial setbacks and unexpected detours. Because if nothing is accidental, if the delay, the obstacle, the redirection is part of an orchestration rather than evidence that things are going wrong, then your relationship to those moments shifts from resistance and frustration to something closer to curiosity. What is this showing me? What door is this closing so that another one can open? What is the lesson or the redirection embedded in this circumstance? Caroline does not always know the answer to those questions in the moment. I want to be honest about that. Sometimes the orchestration only becomes clear in retrospect, looking back from a place of greater perspective. But the willingness to hold the question, to stay open to the possibility that this apparent obstacle is actually part of a larger intelligence at work, keeps the state of being in a place of alignment rather than contraction. And from alignment, the next step tends to reveal itself far more quickly than it does from resistance. The second concept is what Bashar describes as the corridor. Your life, in this framework, has a path, a general direction that your soul chose before this physical experience began, not a rigid, predetermined script with no room for variation, but a corridor, a general trajectory with challenges you chose to encounter and gifts you came to express. And here is what I find most practically liberating about this concept. You have complete freedom in how you walk that corridor. You can walk it quickly or slowly, with joy or resistance, touching the lives of many people or few, expressing your gifts in one way or in dozens of ways. The corridor itself, the general direction, the core challenges and themes of your life, is the soul's choice. But everything about how you move through it is yours. This means that the question is not whether you will encounter certain challenges in your financial life. Some of those were chosen before you arrived. The question is how you will meet them, with contraction and resistance, which tends to slow the journey and reduce what you are able to perceive and create within it, or with openness and alignment, which tends to accelerate things, expand what becomes available, and multiply the expressions of your purpose and your gifts. I think about my own financial journey through this lens constantly. The challenges I faced during my transition, the uncertainty, the fear, the moments of genuine not knowing, were not obstacles inserted by a hostile universe into an otherwise smooth path. They were part of the corridor. And my state of being in response to them, whether I contracted around them or stayed open within them, determined everything about how quickly I moved through them and what I was able to see and create on the other side. Now there is one final piece I want to bring into this conversation, one that Bashar teaches that I think is the most immediately actionable of everything we have covered today. The distinction that, once you genuinely absorb it, removes one of the most common and most persistent excuses for staying stuck. That is exactly where we are headed to close this out. So here we are at the final piece, and I want to open with something that Bashar says that I think is one of the most quietly revolutionary ideas in his entire body of teaching, something that sounds almost too simple to carry the weight it actually carries. But that has the potential to completely dismantle one of the most common stories people tell themselves about why they cannot change. The distinction between habit and choice. Most of us have things in our lives, patterns, behaviors, reactions, ways of relating to money and opportunity and our own potential that we label as habits. And the word habit carries a particular kind of weight, doesn't it? A habit feels involuntary, automatic. Something that happens to you rather than something you choose. And because it feels that way, it also feels like something outside your immediate control, something that requires enormous effort and time and the right conditions to change. Bashar flips this completely. He says something that is so direct it almost feels like a challenge. If you know you are doing it, it is not a habit, it is a choice. Think about that for a moment. A true habit is something that happens below the threshold of conscious awareness, something you do without knowing you are doing it. The moment you become aware of it, the moment you can name it, identify it, observe it happening, it has already crossed the threshold into conscious experience. And once something is in your conscious experience, you are no longer just running the program. You are watching it run. And watching it run is already a form of choice. This matters enormously in the context of financial patterns. How many times have you said or heard someone say, "I know I should be doing things differently, but I just can't seem to help it. It's just how I am. It's a pattern I can't break." And how much of that story is actually being held in place by the label of habit, by the belief that because something has been automatic in the past, it must remain automatic in the future. Bashar's teaching suggests that the moment you genuinely know something is a pattern, the moment you can see it clearly enough to name it and describe it, the pattern is already in the process of dissolving, because you are no longer inside it. You are observing it. And from that position of observation, the question changes from how do I break this habit to why am I choosing this? What belief makes this choice feel like the most beneficial option available to me right now? And that question, why am I choosing this, is where the real gold is. Because Bashar teaches something else that I find both sobering and extraordinarily liberating. You never choose anything you do not believe, in some way, is the most beneficial option available to you in that moment. Not beneficial in an obvious conscious sense, but in some deeper sense that your belief system has constructed. You always move toward what you believe will serve you and away from what you believe will harm you, without exception, immediately, automatically. Which means that every financial pattern you have, every moment of self-sabotage, every hesitation, every pulling back from abundance is not irrational. It is perfectly rational, given the belief system underneath it. There is a payoff, a perceived protection, a story that says this choice, however uncomfortable or limiting it looks from the outside, is somehow safer or better than the alternative. And the moment you can see that, the moment you can ask yourself genuinely, what do I believe would happen if I chose differently? What am I protecting myself from by staying here? You are no longer a passive recipient of your own patterns. You are an investigator, an explorer of your own internal landscape. And that investigation is one of the most powerful things you can do for your financial life. I want to connect this back to something I mentioned earlier in our conversation, the moment I redirected my own trust and the financial shift that followed, because this is the open loop I planted at the beginning, and I want to close it honestly. The shift was not a single dramatic moment. It was a question I started asking myself consistently in the moments when I noticed my old financial patterns activating. Not how do I stop doing this, but why am I choosing this? What am I trusting in right now? And is that actually what I prefer to trust in? And every time I asked that question honestly, something loosened. Not because the answer was always clear or comfortable, but because the act of asking it confirmed that I was no longer inside the pattern looking out. I was outside it, looking in. And from that position, genuine choice, not effortful willpower, not forced positive thinking, but real, grounded, conscious choice, became available in a way it simply had not been before. Before I close, I want to mention something briefly. Everything we have talked about today connects deeply to a framework that Bashar teaches called the 5-step formula, a practical, step-by-step approach to living in alignment with your truest self and allowing abundance to flow naturally from that alignment. It is one of the most practical and most immediately applicable things I have ever encountered in this space, and I have done a full video on it that goes into each step in real depth. I am going to leave that video on the end screen. If what we covered today resonated, I genuinely think that one will take it even further for you. And I want to close with the question that Bashar says is the most important one you can ask yourself. Not, what do I want? Not, how do I get there? But simply this. What is stopping me from being who I truly am? Because here is what Bashar teaches and what my own journey has confirmed again and again. Being who you truly are, living from your genuine alignment, trusting in what you actually prefer, allowing abundance in all its creative forms to flow through your life, is not the hard thing. It is the easiest thing. It is the path of least resistance. What is hard, genuinely, exhaustingly, unnecessarily hard, is being someone you are not. Trusting in stories that do not serve you. Defining abundance so narrowly that most of it cannot reach you. Walking your corridor in resistance rather than in flow. The work is not to become something different. It is to stop pretending you are something less than what you already are. And that, as simple as it sounds, is where everything begins. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this video. It truly means the world to me, and I hope this conversation brought you something real, something you can carry with you starting today. If this resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel. We have so much more to explore together. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. You never know whose life you might change with a single video. The books that have shaped my journey and that I personally recommend are all linked in the description below. Go check them out. They are worth every page. And don't forget, there is a free PDF in the description on equal hours and their meanings. Grab yours. It is completely free, and it might just change the way you see the signs the universe has been sending you all along. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next one.